9/11, it is a day etched in the hearts of every American, a day we will never forget. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Darren Kramer.
Good afternoon. I'm Laura Hutchinson. The aerial attacks by terrorists paralyzed this nation.
Yeah, behind us, right across the Hudson River, here in New York, ground zero of the very first attack.
And tonight, a grim look back on the fear and tears that quickly turned to anger.
We will honor the heroic first responders who rushed to save lives at the World Trade Center. The attacks also changed the face of aviation security.
But we begin with that dark day 20 years ago and the process of healing that is still underway 2 decades later.
News 8's Sabina Kuriakos is live in Lower Manhattan this afternoon. And Sabina, what has the mood been like there today?
Well, Darren and Laura, it's certainly been a bit different than yesterday. The sun is out. There are many people out here on the plaza, many families coming to check out the names of their loved ones etched in stone. And we know 20 years, it brings some separation to the freshness of the horror of that day, but it also puts into stark focus just how much life is lived in 2 decades, both by the survivors and by the families forced to go on without their loved ones. It really makes clear the enormity of their loss. We spoke to 2 Connecticut families, survivors in different ways, on how they're honoring the memory of those lost. One, Cindy McGinty, she survived the death of her husband Michael, who was in the North Tower. The other, John Sindell, he made it out of that tower, got home to his 13-day-old daughter. Both are marking this milestone of 20 years in much the same way, through acts of kindness and unity. John reunited last night with friends who were with him on the 63rd floor of Tower 1. He's going to be dropping off lasagnas and messages of thanks to Connecticut firehouses. And Cindy works with an organization, 9/11 Day, who promotes giving back with good deeds and acts of service.
Because think about what happened that day. People ran into buildings with no sense of self. They carried people downstairs who couldn't make it themselves. They dug through rubble to dig bodies out and give remains to families. They baked and brought meals to people. They cooked for first responders.
I come into this anniversary differently every single year. This anniversary, I knew that I was meeting up with the other 7 folks, and that's really what I focused on. Right now, it's just getting through another year, letting the healing continue for these families, but outside of that, just taking every day as a gift.
And back out here live, Laura and Darren, we're standing right by the memorial to the North Tower, the slate in bronze where Michael McGinty's name is etched. And as you can see all around me, plenty of people stopping to take pictures, lay flowers, and of course, the world's media descending on ground zero once again.
Sabina, are Cindy and John attending that official ceremony for the families tomorrow?
So Cindy McGinty will be here, Darren, with one of her sons, John, who you heard from in that piece. He will actually be back in Connecticut spending time with our first responders in that state. And it really just goes to show you how personal this experience is, whether you want to honor your loved ones in a public manner out here on the memorial tomorrow or just privately at home. Darren.
Sabina Kuriakos reporting for us live in Lower Manhattan for us this afternoon. Sabina, thank you.
All right, Sabina, thank you very much. The long wait for justice continues still 20 years later. The pretrial hearing beginning this week at Guantanamo Bay for 5 men accused in the plot that killed nearly 3,000 people.
The lead defendant, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, called the principal architect of the 9/11 attacks in the 9/11 Commission report. And in 2007, he confessed, saying, quote, "I was responsible for the 9/11 operation from A to Z." This trial has been held up now for nearly a decade. For the survivors and the family members of the victims, it's a process that has certainly taken far too long.
Yeah, a Middletown family has been fighting for years now to expose the actors involved on that tragic day 20 years ago. Now finally a major development. President Biden is ordering now the widespread declassification of documents collected during the investigation into those terror attacks. News 8's Stephanie Simone spoke with the Eagleson family about their push for answers.
Over the years, families like the Eaglesons started to have questions.
I said, how is it that these 19 people with no knowledge of English, no money, no idea how to fly a plane, no knowledge of Western culture, were able to somehow come together and pull off the most devastating and consequential attack on American soil in the history of this country with no help from anyone. And that really is the official narrative that the government would want you to believe.
They're now part of a lawsuit with nearly 10,000 family members from 9/11, all suing to expose Saudi Arabian ties to the terror attacks.
The goal is to get the documents out.
He's talking about Operation Encore, a secret FBI investigation that spanned 10 years, from 2006 to 2016.
The focus of that investigation was 100% entirely on Saudi Arabia.
Like with most international relations, it's complicated. This country is considered our ally. It greatly influences the world's oil supply and buys a lot of weapons from American companies.
We're fighting the oil lobby, we're fighting the weapons lobby, we're fighting the Saudi lobby themselves.
Former FBI agents and congressional leaders joined the effort to get this report released, including the entire Connecticut congressional delegation. But in 2019, a devastating blow. Attorney General William Barr invoked the state secrets principle, which permits the government to block the release of the information. Now they're applying pressure to President Joe Biden and the DOJ.
Some of those documents could be released as early as this evening. We will be watching.
They thought they'd be New Yorkers forever until 9/11 hit. Tonight, you're going to be hearing from a couple who changed their lives after that tragic day, their lives and their location.
Yeah, now they are New Yorkers at heart. News 8's Amber Diaz live at Connecticut's 9/11 Memorial at Sherwood Island State Park in Westport with their story. Amber.
Well, this couple moved from the Big Apple to the Nutmeg State years ago, and they tell me they really have no regrets. They're happy. But every year around this time, they remember that one event that changed their lives forever.
You're looking at live pictures of the World Trade Center. That is Tower 1 on your screen right now.
Kim was in Connecticut, and she called that a plane hit the World Trade Center. And I put this little junky TV, and I see the smoke coming out. Went on the roof, and this is like a 18, 19-story building. Went on the roof, and that's when I actually saw the second one go down. And that was not easy. Now I see people coming in. They look like out of some sort of a scary movie with white powder on their face. Firemen, office workers, still remember a lady, I thought she was blonde, but she had black hair. It was just turned, this white dust on it. I'm standing on 34th Street and I see these 18-wheelers with flatbeds with the injection molded coffins coming in, going towards Javits Center. I still remember the colors. They were mostly gray, some of them were blue. And this was it was unbelievable. This was so surrealistic, streets empty.
As soon as I saw the second plane hit, I knew that it was definitely terrorism. I had a lot of friends in the Israeli army who were New Yorkers now, but had been in the Israeli army. And I was just like, from hearing their experiences and stories, I was like, oh yeah, this is terrorism. This doesn't just happen.
Excuse me, you guys gotta back up, okay? Please, please.
I think after 9/11, I think that my sense of security was definitely gone living in the city. I was working in television production. I was headed in the right direction career-wise and everything. And so we made a major life change, by coming here to Connecticut.
I got kind of kicked out of my home.
I think that if 9/11 had not happened, the furthest we would have moved would have been to Inwood, uptown. I don't think we would have left Manhattan. I think we'd still be there.
And Giles and Kim, they tell me that they are still very happy with their lives here in Connecticut. They have created a family of their own, but they say they will never forget that day or their past. In Westport, Amber Diaz, News 8.
Local victims included a young woman from Avon who died inside the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. News 8 reporter Sarah Cody and photographer Mike Piskorski worked together on 9/11 and covered many family stories in the aftermath. And they recently met with the Toyans to reflect on the tragedy 20 years later.
There really is that what if, what would have been versus what was.
And why Marty Toyan will always ask why. For this Avon family, September 11th, 2001 feels like yesterday.
Does it feel like 20 years?
No. That does not.
And they relive it constantly.
When I think of something, was it before or was it after? And that's how I tell time. Was it before or was it after?
Before or after life with Amy, the 24-year-old Bentley College graduate who lived in Boston, just happened to be at Windows on the World, attending a trade show.
She was up that morning, crack of dawn, got the plane, got to the Trade Center, went up to the top, and that's where she was.
The artistic young woman who played piano and sketched meticulously.
One day she did this one.
Was planning her wedding.
We had gone shopping and she had picked the dress that she wanted and it was going to be ordered, and she was so happy.
We say she passed away or she died. The real truth was she was murdered. It's always in the news. You know, like Afghanistan now and the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, it's still in the news 20 years later.
It was tough for a long time because it was raw.
On the anniversary, the family will take a peaceful drive and stay away from news coverage.
And I think one of the things that makes it most challenging is the whole world knows that it's the date. There's never that private time just to have a quiet moment.
But the family deeply appreciates the community's efforts, especially with this memorial at the Avon Library.
You'll see a bronze statue of a little girl reading a book on a bench with her teddy bear. And that was Amy.
There's room for a child to sit next to the statue.
On the 11th, a lot of people leave flowers anonymously.
She loved that sundress. It was every time Darren would wash it, she would pull it out and want to wear it again.
And those are the happy memories the Toyans cling to.
Everybody remembers the smile.
She looks like a little movie actress there, doesn't she?
Yeah.
The pictures of two sisters.
My dad took the picture. It's literally right out front house.
Who shared so much.
Amy's maybe 2 or 3, so
and you're
I'm
5
like
or 6?
5 or 6.
Okay.
They're grateful for each other.
Broader picture is just for people to cherish what they have in the moment, because you never know, it could be gone instantly.
Perspective gained, potential lost. Amy's artwork, a reminder of where she was.
This is supposed to be a castle in the sky.
And where she's gone.
And she's in the sky now.
In Avon, Sarah Cody, News 8.
So many broken hearts from that awful day, right? Coming up next here, the firefighters who right back there across the river ushered people to safety on that awful day just about 20 years ago.
2 first responders take a look back at their memories of 9/11.
I was on the 24th floor, and the first plane hit, and the building rocked to the right and back. And I opened the door of the conference room, and I saw the plane go by and people falling. It's all right, Dad. And then we started to go down the stairs, and we got down to about 16, and all the doors on the World Trade Center, they lock. So we got down to about, probably about 15 or 13, 14. And I said, you know, there was just a traffic jam of people trying to get down. And I said, everybody back up, back up. Everyone was yelling, back up. Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. I just want to get home. I want to get you home.
And we went back up. I'm starting to calm down now. We went back up.
Do you want to stop for a sec?
No. I just want to go home. We went back up. We regrouped.
Brandy, where's the fire?
The firemen started coming through, and they let us down. Company 22 in New York City, freaking heroes. Not one of them had fear in their eye. They all just kept going up, and we got down to the bottom in the plaza. There was bodies everywhere. They were all on fire and broken. It was just the most horrific thing you've ever seen in your life. And then we got out, and I had a thing of oxygen in my hand and a fire extinguisher, and I must have carried it 3 blocks before I even realized I had it. And then I just bumped into this guy, and we just started walking, and we walked from the Trade Center to 33rd Street, and everybody was lined up trying to hitchhike out of the tunnel. It was like, and this guy pulled up in a pickup truck and drove me all the way to the ferry, and I got home. But I'm home now.
What did you do?
That is still difficult to hear. An unforgettable interview for many in the News 8 newsroom who are covering that tragic day. James Vasquenza giving that emotional account after he made it out of Tower 2 alive.
Unreal. He mentioned the firefighters who helped rescue him, saying not one of them had fear in their eye. And I'll tell you, in the hours and days following the September 11th attacks, hundreds of first responders rushed to Ground Zero to search for victims and help those who made it out of the towers alive, not showing any fear at all. Among those heroes, New York City firefighter Regina Wilson, one of the few African-American women on the force on that day. News 8's Keith Kuntz talked to her about that fateful day and a phone call that may have saved her life.
I barely could see at the time.
New York City firefighter Regina Wilson remembers vividly the morning of 9/11/2001 on a fire truck rushing through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel from Brooklyn to Lower Manhattan.
As we were going through the tunnel, there was this wind, this massive wind that came through the tunnel, and it shook the engine. And it shook the engine so violently that we had to stop, because we didn't know what was going on.
A relative newcomer to the NYFD at the time, she quickly realized that the day ahead would be unlike any, even the most hardened veterans of the force had ever experienced.
We also knew that on the other side, it was chaos and confusion.
Destruction everywhere she looked.
We saw cars on fires, we had buildings on fires, we had all of these different elements of fire that we needed to deal with. So we tried to go to the hydrants. There was no water pressure coming out of the hydrants.
Wilson tells me she returned to Ground Zero to help out with recovery efforts and search for the remains of victims every day for months after the attacks, even on her days off. In a twist of fate, Regina had switched schedules with a colleague on the morning of 9/11. That request came from her friend and mentor, John Shapura. He arrived at Ground Zero on one of the first trucks called out and died trying to save people when the first tower collapsed.
I try to treat every day as a gift, and I try and make sure that I respect and honor the days that's given to me, because it respects and honors John's memory. To not do something productive with my life, or to be able to help others, or to have some type of meaning, I feel like it would discredit a man who tried to help me.
When Wilson became a New York City firefighter, she was the first African-American woman to join the ranks in 15 years, enduring a rigorous training academy to land the job.
I spent a lot of times crying in my bathroom, trying to figure out whether or not this is something that I wanted to do. And I needed to push through it, because I understood the importance and the significance of me becoming a firefighter on the fire department of New York.
2 decades after the terrorist attack, Wilson continues to be passionate about being a firefighter and serving her community. One of New York City's bravest and a hero of 9/11. In New York City, Keith Kuntz, News 8.
Wow. The mother of a black FDNY firefighter killed in the 9/11 attacks is now on a mission to make sure her son and firefighters who looked like him are never forgotten.
Leon Smith responded to the burning towers on September 11, 2001, and made the ultimate sacrifice to help save lives. It is painful, but his mom, Irene Smith, continues to tell his story. Her goal is to make sure her son and the 11 other black firefighters killed in 9/11 are not remembered, are honored more, but at the same time as the rest of the FDNY members who gave their lives that day.
So many people do not even know it was 12 black firefighters.
It's not unique for black firefighters to remember their own.
The New York City Fire Department has really made an effort to increase diversity in the ranks. Black firefighters now make up roughly 8% of the department, an increase from 3% 2 decades ago.
The chief of New Haven's fire department also spent time responding at Ground Zero after the 9/11 terror attacks.
News 8's Kent Pierce spoke with him about his experience and how it changed him forever.
Before he was New Haven's fire chief, John Alston was a firefighter in Jersey City, right across the Hudson from the World Trade Center.
Grew up and went to school downtown Jersey City. I watched the buildings go up when they were building them, and then I watched them come down as an adult.
On 9/11, he rushed to work and heard firefighters inside the towers still talking on their radios as the unimaginable happened.
We were stationed downtown Jersey City. We watched it in them just dissolve. Yeah.
Alston and his team then got sent across the river. After officials cleared everyone away from 7 World Trade Center, Alston was there as that 47-story tower collapsed.
You don't forget that. The sound, the noise, the dust that chases you up the street.
Then came days of working the pile, searching for survivors and finding mostly remains.
The New York City firefighters would go in, and they would go to that area, and we would all stop, and they would dress the body in the flag. We would all salute, and they would bring them out.
343 firefighters died on 9/11, a loss felt by all firefighters everywhere.
What unifies us is the uniform, is the badge, is the patch, is the promise, is the pledge that we're here to serve others.
Just this past May, Alston saw that when he lost one of his own, firefighter Ricardo Torres. The FDNY helped organize the funeral, and his former colleagues from Jersey City were right there too.
I don't know how they did it, but they were the first group we saw when we turned onto the street. It meant the world to me.
The grief of losing colleagues haunted Alston for years after 9/11. He tells everyone suffering, get professional help.
And so I always encourage people to seek counseling, to talk to someone, to navigate grief. We're not designed to do it by ourselves.
There is also the physical toll from working the pile. Ground Zero air has now killed more first responders than the collapse of the towers. So far, Alston remains healthy. He goes back to New Jersey all the time, looks over at the new Manhattan skyline, and remembers those lost.
To honor them is to live the best that we can. That's how we honor them.
And we can remember that they did not die in vain. Thanks to the good work of those firefighters, thousands of people made it out of the World Trade Center on that day. As Alston likes to remind his firefighters, sometimes being a firefighter means being willing to trade your life for someone else's. That's why we call them heroes. In Jersey City, New Jersey, I'm Kent Pierce, News 8.
Still to come here on 9/11, never forget a healing field.
The significance of hundreds of flags across the Madison Town Green. It's called a healing field. Flags set up to honor heroes. This tribute in Madison, Connecticut is for active and fallen veterans, first responders, and those the town lost on 9/11/2001, 20 years ago. 250 flags at half-staff, 4 in front, signifying the lives tied to Madison that were lost when the towers fell on that bright September morning. News 8's Ann Nyberg takes us there.
We
hope that the community will come out and visit and walk among the flags, because each flag is dedicated and each flag therefore has a story. So we want people to come out and look at those dedication flags and remember those individuals.
It's the hope that those who walk among these flags will stop and reflect and remember and never forget all of our heroes.
America's symbol of red, white, and blue waves on the town green of Madison, a land centuries old, and during this time a solemn place. These healing fields have been erected across the country since 2001, after some 3,000 were killed, shaking a nation to its core.
I was in the finance industry at the time, and I had colleagues down in Wall Street, some of whom were killed. It hit home for me.
It was just an incredible day where you felt the world just changed. And went home, hugged my baby. 20 years later, that child, my daughter, is a senior at the Coast Guard Academy. She felt so strongly that she needed to serve her country. And she's grown up with learning about our history and how fragile our freedom can be.
The four with ties to Madison lost on that day are remembered with memorials. Anthony Demas, Peter Gelinas, Robert Peraza, and flight attendant Diane Bullis-Snyder, a married mother of two. She was on board American Airlines Flight 11 out of Boston's Logan International Airport. Her plane was the first to alert the nation to a terrible tragedy. It hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m. She never got the chance to say goodbye to her family.
It was an interesting circumstance. She was not supposed to be on that flight. She took the place of a friend of hers who had a family obligation, and as a result, she lost her life. Her parents lived here. She grew up here. She graduated from Daniel Hand High School, and we have established a memorial for her.
In the still of the night, with flags lighted, it gives way to a time of reflection, to remember all lost on that day, and to remember two words: never forget.
And here's a look at the opening ceremony of the Healing Field. It took place on the Madison Green last Friday. Gold Star families were among those who took part. Helen and Bob Peterson Kaiser lost their son, Army Captain Andrew Peterson Keel, in the war in Afghanistan.
This is a memory for me. Every time I see the flag, I am always reminded of the casket coming off the plane at Dover. This is a very sacred symbol to our country, and I'm proud of Madison.
And the Healing Field will remain until September 14th.
It is quite a sight out there. It's something. The 9/11 terror attacks shattered our sense of security. It had to be rebuilt from the ground up.
Coming up next, the new security measures that have changed the way we travel, work, and live our lives.
"9/11 changed life as we knew it. From the airport.
Today, every piece of checked baggage that goes aboard an aircraft is now scanned for explosives.
To security at big events, and even in our homes, America would never be the same.
We became more agile and adaptable as the threat changed.
Here's ABC's Alex Perchet with a look at what's changed in the world of security in the last 2 decades.
In the 20 years since the 9/11 terror attacks, air travel and security have changed drastically. In fact, before the attacks, there wasn't even TSA. Today, checkpoints and security screenings are the norm. Elizabeth Newman is a national security expert for ABC News.
We got better at physically screening you as you came through the airport. We became more agile and adaptable as the threat changed.
Like with Richard Reed, just months after 9/11, Reed boarded an American Airlines flight from Paris to Miami with homemade bombs hidden in his shoes. Crew members and passengers noticed him trying to light the fuse and restrained him.
Afterwards, we all had to start taking our shoes off to go through security.
Limiting and taking out liquids and gels during TSA screenings, that came in 2006 after British police discovered a transatlantic terror plot. Another major change, the creation of no-fly lists.
If somebody is on that list, they don't even board a plane to come to the United States.
There were also highly criticized security tools. The Patriot Act expanded law enforcement surveillance, but also authorized indefinite detention of non-citizens the government deemed a national security threat, and gave law enforcement permission to search property and records without a warrant.
I would argue it was a necessary evil for the short term.
Since its passage in 2001, there have been several legal challenges, courts ruling a number of its provisions unconstitutional. And a key part of the Patriot Act, which allowed for surveillance of telephone records, expired last year. But the big question is, 2 decades later, with all these changes, are we safer? A recent report from the United Nations shows terror groups ISIS and Al-Qaeda have had growth in Africa. ISIS also finding safe havens in Iraq and Syria. And with the recent collapse of the Afghan government, top U.S. military officials warned the country could become a cradle for terrorism, potential plots stateside or against Americans. Experts telling us a key will be remaining vigilant.
So the challenge in the space that we're in post 20 years post 9/11, terrorism budgets are on the downslope. They're not increasing, they're decreasing. The workload hasn't decreased.
Alex Perche, ABC News, Washington.
Here's a closer look now at some of the changes at airports since 9/11. Now, only passengers are allowed back in security. Back in the day, you could go greet your loved ones as they came off the plane. High-tech body scanners have replaced the old-fashioned metal detectors. Planes got cockpit doors and hidden air marshals. Before 9/11, you didn't even need to show ID to fly. You could just walk on, pay in cash if you wanted to. You could bring your drink on the plane and leave your shoes on.
Prior to 9/11, baggage was loaded aboard the aircraft because the mentality was no one would get on aboard an aircraft and kill themselves. But today, every piece of checked baggage that goes aboard an aircraft is now scanned for explosives.
I don't mind the hassle because I'd rather be safe on the flight than having a flight going into a building.
Experts say the next big change in airport security will be here soon, too. Biometrics. Computers taking a close look at your face or eyes or fingerprints to make sure you are who you say you are.
Now to more stories of the victims from their loved ones. One Windsor woman who worked in Tower 1 was killed in the tragedy. News 8's Sarah Cody interviewed her husband 20 years ago and recently met with him again to talk about healing and reflection.
She was a force of nature. Yep.
And nature is where Dwayne Orlowski finds peace.
The trauma that day it just doesn't go away.
Trauma that's with him all the time.
It's always kind of lurking in the background.
But now, especially.
This time of year, the symptoms of it crop up, like, being short with people.
Signs of the PTSD Orlowski suffered after his wife Margaret was killed while working on the 96th floor of the World Trade Center's Tower 1.
She got up, got dressed, and took off.
The 50-year-old commuted 2.5 hours each way every day from Windsor to her job at Marsh McLennan in New York, a testament to her love of home and work.
Organized, caring.
The former librarian loved history, and the couple enjoyed a unique hobby in their reproduction colonial on Settlement Hill.
Whenever we entertained people in the house, we'd always cook on the hearth. She loved gardening, so we had a wonderful garden there.
And after her death, the neighborhood dedicated this memorial garden to Margaret. A similar spot exists in historic Deerfield, Massachusetts, along with a hearth cooking program in her name.
Margaret would have wanted me to have the life and live the life as fully as possible. And that means doing new things and being new people.
Still processing his grief, Dwayne got involved in the Voices Center for Resilience, helping to build a database that honors victims. The work was cathartic.
And it was fun, doing something that was connected to 9/11, but also supporting the families.
In 2011, he remarried a wonderful woman named Kate. They now live in a serene spot near the shoreline.
We see eagles, geese, swans.
On the anniversary, Dwayne will spend time with his grandson and son, quietly remembering Margaret, called a gardener of not only plants and flowers, but of people.
She loved to get people together and connect with them. Her friends, I think, really acknowledge her for helping them grow.
Again, a reference to the natural world, home to Margaret's everlasting spirit. In Guilford, Sarah Cody, News 8.
In the classroom when the planes hit the World Trade Center. Coming up here in just a moment on News 8, a former New York teacher relives his experience that day.
Here's a silent tribute to the victims on the town green in Old Saybrook. Nearly 3,000 flags for each one of the victims. We'll be right back. Educators, among those with strong memories of 9/11, a career change left a Hartford principal in a New York City classroom.
News 8's Mackenzie Maynard brings us his story and how it shaped his path in education 2 decades later.
Everything changed. It's hard to believe that it was 20 years ago.
Tim Barber is the principal at Craig University of Hartford's Magnet School.
What's up, Miss Tucker? How you doing?
While he's been overseeing these halls for 14 years, education wasn't always his path.
And I was working as a tax accountant in New York City.
But he decided on a career change.
And in 2001, April, I applied to the New York City Teaching Fellows Program, which was to take people that want to make a career change, become a teacher.
He got accepted and started the program in June. In fact, he and his now wife both made the career change together and became teachers at PS 49 in the South Bronx.
So it was really my 4th day of teaching in my entire life.
His 4th day of teaching will forever be unforgettable.
And I saw another teacher come up to the door and just like knock in the window and told me to come here. So I went over to the door and went out in the hallway, and she told me that a plane just hit the World Trade Center.
Trying to process it himself as he had a room full of 3rd grade students.
But I remember looking in the hallway, and there was parents just coming in the building, coming into the classrooms, and eventually they started coming in our classroom, and they were just coming to get their kids.
Everyone left early that day and returned 2 days later.
I just remember coming back and just making sure that we were trying to be strong for our kids and being good role models for them, and doing our best to answer their questions.
A moment in history that holds so much more meaning to Tim Barber as he continues his path as an educator 2 decades later.
20 years ago, my life changed, and I guess I'm a lucky one because it changed for the better. It helped me really find a direction in life and, and just find purpose.
In West Hartford, Mackenzie Maynard, News 8.
Next, a retired Connecticut firefighter making it his mission to help first responders.
His motto, whatever it takes. You'll meet him when we come back.
A retired firefighter in Willimantic has spent the last 2 decades making sure the 9/11 first responders are taken care of.
His mission started as soon as the towers fell, right back over there, and has not stopped since. News 8's Stephanie Simone introduces us to him.
We know they're in heaven, but I like to take it a little further. In heaven, of course, there's a grand department.
South Wyndham's Jim Preston wrote Heaven's Fire Department days after September 11th and delivered it to every firehouse in Manhattan and Brooklyn. But his work didn't stop there.
I mean, we left a funeral one day, and my wife said to me, I know you still feel guilty because you didn't work at the pile, but I'm so glad you didn't, because I would be sick now, too.
Yep, he does a lot of good things. Oops. Yep, he He's good. He's a good advocator. He advocates for a lot of different things, but the 9/11 family is our family.
A firefighter at the time, he felt compelled to respond, and he has for 20 years.
One of the things that the September 11 family says is out of great tragedy came incredible love.
This stack is kept in the pocket of his dress uniform.
Cards are memorial cards from funeral services and memorial services.
Some were killed on that horrible day. Others many years later, like Ray Pfeiffer. He slept in his fire truck for a week after the terror attack.
He died from cancer. He got working at the Trade Center.
And so did his friend John McNamara, who penned this to his wife.
He wrote that on a piece of paper to her when he was in the hospital. And it became my motto, whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes to make sure the 9/11 families are taken care of.
Over time, you just meet people.
He's active with the Feel Good Foundation, started by John Feel.
He had a large beam slide onto his foot, and he lost half of his foot during the operation there. And when he was home, he started thinking, you know, I got to find a way to help people.
So in their little pastry shop, a cupcake for later in Willimantic, they raise money to help the families.
Making sure that their memory, their legacy lives on forever.
That's why my part is to listen to them, listen, talk, you know, and try to help, you know, make it a little better if I can, you know. Sorry.
And they've been listening for 2 decades.
When it comes down to it, 9/11 is never going to end. It's always going to be there for the people that it affected. And all we can do is keep talking about it so that people don't forget them. God, the ultimate chief, knew this would be a tough transition, so he needed the best, and he called the FDNY. But they will always be there, our mutual aid from above, always watching over, keeping us safe.
In Willimantic,
They'll do their part to lead us to safety.
Stephanie Simone.
And if not, they will accompany us to the chief's desk for our new assignment with the Heavens Fire Department.
News 8.
Next, pushing to raise awareness.
Coming up, why a man is traveling from Boston's Logan Airport to Ground Zero with a beverage cart. On September 11th, tomorrow, the brother of a fallen New York City firefighter will complete his 42-day journey from Washington, D.C. to Lower Manhattan. Frank Siller is walking for 6 weeks across 6 states, a more than 500-mile journey, trekking from the nation's capital to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and finally to Ground Zero. The Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation was born in memory of his brother. Stephen heroically ran through the Battery Tunnel after his firefighting shift on September 11th with 60 pounds of gear on his back. He joined his squad, saving lives in the South Tower. The young father of 5 was never seen again. The Tunnel to Towers Foundation has raised $250 million in 20 years.
Among those who lost their lives on that day 20 years ago, a number of flight attendants and airline crew members. A former flight attendant now is working to make sure those lives are not forgotten either. Paul Veneto is behind Paulie's Push. He's pushing a beverage cart from Boston's Logan Airport to near Ground Zero. He made his way through Connecticut last week. Veneto says the men and women on those planes stood up to terrorists to protect the people on board and the rest of us below.
So for 20 years, their family members have never heard the word hero. Their kids never. Their kids never heard that. Their nieces and cousins and sisters and brothers never heard that word that they were heroes. It's not a big deal for me to push this cart. I got their pictures on top of this cart, and when it's raining, when it's hot, when my legs are hurting, I look down at their faces and I say, what I'm doing is nothing compared to what they accomplished that morning.
He says the country came together after 9/11, and that really started with these crew members at 30,000 feet, and they need to be remembered as well.
That's right. We're so glad you joined us for our special presentation, 9/11 Never Forget. We have more coverage of the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks coming up on News 8 at 5.
Before we get to that, though, we want to pause for a moment and remember the victims from Connecticut.